If you've been wanting to dive into Figma, then you've come to the right place. Today, we're going to be creating this cool web page, and along the way, you're going to get a crash course in using some of Figma's best tools like a professional. Down in the description, we're linking a starter file, so if you want to clone it and design along with me, then go ahead and do that. And without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so once you open up the starter project, this is what you're going to see. We'll go through these things one by one. So first over here, we have the colors that we're going to be using. We have some logos and symbols for the brand that we're designing for, some images, and these were all created using Midjourney, but you'll have access to these if you want to use these exact ones. You'll see this wireframe, very messy wireframe that we put together for this site. So we'll be following it for the most part. It's just to give us an idea of what of this information is going to go where. So over here, we've also got some icons that we'll be using, some fonts that we're going to be using. So we're going to be using Inter and Roboto Mono. So these are kind of the starting point for our fonts. And then we have our page copy. So we're just going to be pulling from this for all of the text we're going to be using in the site. And I also want to point out that I actually changed the canvas color to make it darker. So you can do that just by clicking anywhere on the canvas, and you can come up here and switch the color of the page. So by default, it kind of looks like this, but I kind of like designing in dark mode, I guess you could say. So I just made it a little bit darker. Yeah, that's that. I guess before we dive in, I do want to show you around Figma a little bit. So this over here is the layers panel. So when we're selected on layers here, just like any other design tool, you're going to see your layers one on top of the other. The ones, on the top are on top of the ones on the bottom. So for example, if we come up here, we can tell that this gray is actually behind the white because it's below it in the layers panel. And there are certain shortcuts for sort of moving things around on the layers panel. So for one, you can hold down Command and hit right bracket, and that will bring it up one level. You can just do right bracket to bring it to the very, very front. You can see that brought it to the very top. So yes, this is the layers panel. Over here, when you click on assets, this is where all of our components and styles are gonna live, and we'll get there in 1 second. And you can have multiple pages in Figma. So here you can navigate to whatever page you're on. So it might be nice to have, kind of like your exploration page here, and then maybe your wireframes here and your designs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's that. Above that here, we have our toolbar. So I won't, point out every single tool, but it does show you what some of the shortcuts are for the tools. I almost never come up here because I use the shortcuts. To do a new frame, you hit F. To do a new rectangle, you hit R. And to do a line of text or a text box, you hit T. And those are the most kind of important quick shortcuts for the things right here. Okay, so then in the middle is your canvas. Of course, this is where our design is actually going to live. And then if we click on any design element, this is where our properties panel over here on the right comes in. So I can click on images and see all the properties associated with images. Text, we have properties associated with text, things like that. And of course, we're going to get much deeper into that. This properties panel is where a lot of the magic happens. Okay, so now let's set up a frame for this design. So I'm just going to hit F on my keyboard. And as you can see, when we did that, these frame sort of like templates came up. So we can just create a frame of any size, but I'm going to undo that, and we can also hit F and look for what we want. So I'm going to choose this desktop 1440. Doesn't really matter the height because we're just going to, keep adding our sections here. So this is going to be our main frame for our design. So I'm just going to call this home page. And as you can see on the layers panel, this is what a frame looks like on the layers panel. It has this kind of like hashtag as the symbol. Now, something that's really helpful, especially when it comes to designing for web, is using a grid. And so Figma makes that really easy. So I'm selected on my frame here, and I'm going to come over to Layout Grid and hit the plus button. And by default, it's going to give me exactly that, a grid. What I actually want is columns. So I'm just going to click there and change it to columns. But instead of 5, I actually want 12. I want a margin of 28. So here on each side, we've got 28 pixels so that these columns aren't like all the way to the edge. And then I want a gutter, or a space between each column, of 14 pixels. Okay. And so now this is just really going to help us place all of our elements on the page and have it feel really consistent, and also be easier for a developer to build down the line. And the great thing is you can turn this off and on by hitting the I here to, you know, kind of disable it so that you can be designing and then, okay, I want to see what it really looks like, and turn it off. So we'll be doing that throughout this process. So before we start adding items, I want to talk quickly about libraries and sort of saved styles. We're not going to go too deep into it, but it is super helpful, for example, to save some colors into a local library, or basically to this file, so that we don't have to keep eyedropping a color, we don't have to keep pasting a hex code. We can just have our palette set up for us. So it's super easy to do that. So I'm just going to select on one of our colors, come over here, and I'm gonna hover over these 4 dots where it says style. Click on that, and then click on the plus button. And this is gonna allow us to create a new style. So we'll just call this gray. And then I'm gonna do that for this too. This is white and black. Perfect. So now you can see over here under local styles, we've got our color styles. So now I'm just going to hit R for rectangle. I'm going to just make this shape here. And if I come over here, hit those 4 dots, then I can choose from any of these colors, and it just makes it super easy. Some more things that we might want to add to our styles panel are our type styles. So same thing, I'm just going to click on this style, click on the 4 dots, click create style, and we'll call this header. Do the same thing here. We'll call this header 2, and we'll call this one paragraph. Okay, now that doesn't mean we're limited to just these, but it is really nice to just have a starting point. And the last thing I'm gonna do setup wise is come over to these icons. And if you don't know where to get icons, Google actually has a material design icon library that is super, super easy to use. You can download them as SVGs, which I find to be the best way to work with icons. So I highly recommend looking into that. It's completely free. But once we have our icons in Figma, it's a good idea to set ourselves up for success by framing them consistently. So what I'm going to do is click on this icon here. This is a group of rectangles here, as we can see in the layers panel. What I'm going to do is hit Control, click, come down, and hit frame selection. So now this is in a frame. What I'm going to do is make this frame 16 pixels by 16 pixels and center my icon in there. So as you can see, we're just going to mess with it a little bit so that it centers perfectly. And then we'll call this hamburger. And then I'm going to do the same for these. So I'm going to hit frame selection, 16 by 16. Make sure that this is not going to scale on us. 16 by 16, center that, arrow. And one more time, we're gonna select on this, and the shortcut to frame a selection is Option Command G. Select on this, make sure it's not gonna scale, 16, 16. And we'll call this copyright. So this way, all of our icons are sitting in the same size frame, which is just gonna make our life much easier and help keep things consistent rather than running around with completely different sized icons. Okay, so back to our web page. Let's start with our hero and navigation. So for this top hero section, I'm gonna create a new frame. So I'm hitting F on my keyboard, and I am going to just stretch it all the way across. And I think like around 810 pixels high is a pretty good height for a hero. On most screen sizes, you'll be able to see a little bit below it, which encourages scrolling. So that's great. And one thing I want to point out is that using frames instead of rectangles is really important in Figma because rectangles don't have nearly as many properties and as much flexibility as frames. And you're going to see what I mean with auto layout and things like that as we get further into this. But I basically never use rectangles unless I'm creating like a vector icon or shape or something like that. To kind of design and lay things out, I always use frames. And as you can see, you can always have frames within frames, within frames, within frames, within frames. So it's just a really nice sort of way to organize things. And speaking of organization, I am going to come over here to the layers panel and name this frame hero. Okay, great. Now I'm going to turn off our columns for now. We don't really need them at the moment. And I'm going to select on this hero frame and I'm going to add a fill. But instead of adding just a color fill, I'm going to add an image fill. So I'm going to go in and choose an image. So we've got our hero image here that I've saved to my computer. Perfect. So now we've got this image fill here. And now we're just going to start bringing over all of the elements that we want inside this frame. So now I'm going to come over and just start adding these elements in. So I'm just going to copy and paste a copy of this. Another way that you can duplicate something really easily is by holding down Option and dragging out a copy like that. So that's what I normally do to save time. So we're going to be using this pretty big. It's the main brand logo. So we'll just throw it in somewhere for now. We're also going to need a headline. So I'm going to bring this on over. Same thing. I'm just duplicating it by holding down Option and dragging, creating the future of vision. Now, also, if you have a hard time selecting on an element on the canvas, so like, for example, by default, these elements are nesting inside of this hero frame, which is exactly what we want. But as a result, if I go and click on this just once and try to move it, it's not going to move. I'm not selected on it. I'm just selected on the entire hero frame. So you can double click or you can command click to sort of click into a group or a frame. To select on what you want to select on. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to command click on this and I'm going to go over to my text styles and hit header 1 because I think that's really what we want for this. Okay, I want this like above the head so it's not covering the glasses. We're going to put it just up against this fourth column. And then I'm going to have this logo take up exactly 2 columns. Here and make sure that our top edge is aligned. So to do that, let's say they're not aligned. I'm going to click on both of them, and to click on 2 things at once, you can hit shift. So I'm going to shift and click there. And then you can come on up here and do align top. And that will make sure that they're perfectly aligned. Okay, so we've aligned them, but I want to make sure I'm using consistent spacing. So we have 52. I'm actually going to do 40 pixels on the top. That's perfect. And then we also have our navigation over here. So I'm going to drag out a copy of this. And I think I want to use our header 2 for this. I'm just going to double click on that edge bounding line to bring it in and hug the contents. And we've got 40 pixels of space on the top and bottom. That's good. But these are really squished together, which we don't want. That doesn't really make for optimum clickability. So I'm actually going to detach this style so that I can change it up a little bit. And I'm going to come here to paragraph spacing, and I'm going to increase that. So we don't need to do it that much. I would say, what does 12 look like? Yeah, 12 looks good. Then we'll get our smaller logo. This is gonna be like what you click on if you want to go, you know, back to home on our navigation. So I'm gonna align it to the very edge, 40 pixels on the top, and I'm gonna make it 40 pixels wide. So this is the start of our navigation. We also want to create a cart button though. So we don't want cart within here because it's more important. We wanna like really bring it out to the side. So to create a button, I'm gonna do it kind of off to the side first. I'm gonna hit F for frame. I wanna make sure that the height is at least 44 pixels. For optimum tappability and accessibility. I'm going to round the corners a bit. So to round corners, you can select on the frame, come up here to corner radius. Let's see, oh, 20 is a lot. Let's do like 4. I want to keep it kind of subtle. And then I'm gonna hit T on my keyboard for text, and we're gonna call it cart. Again, we can use our header 2 font, which is good. Then I'm going to drag out a copy of this. We want to know what's like how many things are in our cart. So we have this. I'm going to name the frame button, but this isn't looking very good, right? So this is where I'm going to introduce you to auto layout, which is honestly one of my best friends when it comes to designing in Figma. I use it so much. You don't have to use it for everything, but I'm going to show you how it works so that you can decide when you want to use it and not use it. So auto layout, I'm going to hit plus to like, you know, start working on auto layout. As you can see, that automatically hugged in all of that extra space, and it's hugging our elements. In fact, it says hug on the top and sides. So we can really kind of tell it how to behave here. So right now we have 25 pixels of space in between these items. We have 19 pixels of horizontal padding, so on the left and right, and 15 pixels of vertical padding, so on the top and bottom. I'm cool with the 15. Let's make it 15 on the sides as well. And then I'm gonna say 20 in the middle should be good. In fact, that actually seems like a little too much. Should we do 10? Yeah, I think that's good. So now the beauty of this is, say it doesn't say cart. Let's say it says, I don't know, button. See how the button is growing with what I'm typing? That is just super, super helpful, and it just saves so much time. So I really love that. So I'm going to drag this in. As I'm dragging it in, you can see that it is going inside of this hero frame. And then I'm gonna drag it so that it is perfectly aligned to this column here. Oh, I didn't explain before how you can tell how far away something is. So I'm just holding Option. I have this button selected, and I'm holding down Option, and I'm like hovering over the edges to get these red numbers to show up so that I know how far away I am from certain things. So that's a helpful shortcut as well. Okay, and one more thing for the navigation, we want our hamburger icon. So I'm going to copy this icon and paste it over here. And I think I want it all the way against this edge. And that makes me think I might want this. I might want to ignore my columns for a second and just have these sort of live together. So I'm going to have these 40 pixels away from each other. Now, turning off those, I think that looks pretty good. So next, I want to just have like a paragraph down here. So I'm going to grab this paragraph here and paste it on in. And since it's a paragraph, we're going to use our paragraph style, and we'll align it to this edge. And we'll have it take up 3 columns. I think that should be good. And since we have 40 pixels of space on the top, I'm gonna put 40 pixels of space on the bottom along this as well. I think that is gonna be good. That's looking great. Now we're just going to add in some more of our icons. So to sort of round out this design, I wanna have this kind of mirroring this and have something in each corner. So I'm gonna grab the arrow here and we can have a button that just says scroll down. Make sure we're 40 here. And then I'm hitting T, scroll down. I think I like that in the paragraph. By the way, if you want to go deeper with Figma and learn even more best practices and things related to prototyping, creating micro animations, and even more stuff than we're covering in this video, I've actually done a course with Flux that is all about designing websites in Figma, and it goes much, much deeper than we're going in this video. So if you're enjoying this and you think you might like to go even further, then definitely check out that course. It's going to be linked in the description. Here is our hero. I think it's looking really good. Now let's dive into the next section. So we're going to do kind of a little bit of an about section here. So first, what I want to do is hit F and create a frame for this section. And I'm gonna give it a fill of our gray. Then let's go over and see what text we want in this about section. Now, of course, since we're on this light gray, we are not going to want to use our white text. We're gonna want to use black. So I'm gonna come over here, choose black. We're gonna use this as a paragraph and this as our heading. So come in here, heading 1, and this looks pretty good, but it's competing with this one. So I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. So I'm going to detach this and we'll make it like 78, I think. Cool. So now let's turn back on our columns because without them, I don't know where to put anything. I'm going to align these here and I'm gonna do a little bit more space on the top and bottom than I did on this image, just to give it a little bit more padding. So I'm using 100 pixels on the top here. And then let's choose this and we'll make this our paragraph. And I think I want this to take up 3 columns again. So we'll do that. And then I want it aligned to the bottom of this. So you can see as I'm moving it, I'm getting that red line that shows me it's aligned to the bottom. I also like to hold down shift when I'm moving things, like the line height, the space between the letters. I think that's called letting or kerning. I kind of forget. Don't come at me. But yeah, there's a lot that you can do to manipulate text here. I already kind of have it how I want it, but there's just a lot you can do. So feel free to play around with that as well. Let's give ourselves kind of like a title here, or like a label, I guess you could say. We'll say it's header 2. I think that looks good. Just make sure we're aligned. Okay, easy enough. So we're probably gonna need more room here because we also want to have, if we look at our wireframe here, we want to have product images within this section as well. So in order to create like a product thumbnail, I want to make that a component. And a lot of times in design, this is called a card. So we're going to create a card component, and I'm going to show you kind of all about components. So we're going to hit F on our keyboard again. We're gonna make a frame. I just made it a random size, but we want to make sure that our images here can fit within them. So let's see, this is 452 by 452. So we're gonna make this 452. The height doesn't matter quite yet. So then I'm going to do another frame. So a frame within a frame. So this main frame is going to be called product card. And then this frame inside here is going to be our image. So I'm going to do what I did before. We want this to be a square, so 452. And I'm going to give it an image fill. And we're just going to choose from those images that we have. Okay, that's great. So then we have this part of the card, but we also need the name of the product. So we'll go over here and grab that from our copy section. And so here's what we have. It's called Intelligent Glasses. So let's see how we want to lay this out. This text here, let's do it in black, and let's do it as our H2. And that looks good, but I don't want it like all black. I think I want this to sort of recede into the background a little bit. So I am going to give it an opacity, this whole text layer, I'm going to give an opacity of 50%. Then I'm going to copy this out and we'll do sync to XM. So that's what it's like actually called. So we want to do 100%. And I think we want to make this a little bit bigger. So instead of the 13, I'm going to do 18. Okay. And then I'm going to use this same style to do our price. So now we want to make sure that this is like laid out exactly how we want it. So first of all, we'll bring it over here for now. We don't necessarily need this like background white. So I'm going to get rid of it. So instead of changing the color, I'm just going to literally get rid of the fill. So it's zero fill. It's not an opacity fill. It's just no fill. Then I'm going to turn on auto layout, and that kind of hugged these together again. So what I want to do is frame these together because I want these to sort of stretch the whole component and have an automatic amount of space in between. So I'm going to do Command Option G to group. And instead of a fixed width, I'm going to do fill the container. And then I'm going to click on this whole product and we're going to, wow, what is happening? Yeah, okay. That's right, believe it or not, but we just need to change the settings. Okay, so we don't need this much space in between. In fact, we probably need like maybe 8 pixels. 12 might be good. Okay, so the reason this isn't working is because we need to turn on auto layout on this frame level as well. And then instead of having this gap, we're going to do auto. And by doing auto, it's going to do as much space as will separate the items so that they're pinned to each side when you have on fill container. Okay, so those are things like those auto layout are just things that take practice, but they really are helpful to learn. So now we have this, and I'm gonna actually bring it over here because I'm gonna make this into a component. And the reason that you would make something into a component is if you wanna use it throughout your project multiple times. So buttons, for example, are great things to make components. We only have one real button on our web page, so I didn't make that cart button a component, but you absolutely could if you were creating a whole website. Cards are great things to be components. You can get really granular with it and make tons of elements on your website a component. But this is a really good example. So the reason it's so helpful is because you can make changes on the main component level that trickle down to all of the instances of that component. But you can also make changes on the instance level that don't necessarily, it doesn't go both ways. So it just creates a lot of flexibility, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So to create a component from this, you can either go up to this kind of 4 diamond icon here and hit create component, or the shortcut is to do Option Command K on your keyboard. So now this is our main component, and you can tell something is a main component if this icon next to it is filled. These diamonds are filled. Let me show you what the instance of the component looks like. So if I just select on this and do Command C, Command V to paste it so that now I have 2. See how this over on the layers panel, has an empty diamond, and this has like the component symbol, the 4 filled diamonds. That's how you can tell which is the main and which is the instance. And on the canvas, you can see here, this is what the main looks like, and the instance doesn't have a label. So something I like to do is keep my components either off to the side or on a separate page or even in an organized, separate file. But we won't get into that. But I like to have it off to the side so I'm not accidentally putting that main component on the canvas, because we only want instances on the canvas. We want to only come back and touch this if we want to make a change that is going to affect all of the instances. So for example, I think I want for these to have rounded corners, these images. So that is the case on all instances, I'm going to make that change over here on the main component level. So I'm going to click into this image frame and we're going to give it a 4 pixel radius. And so let's see what that looks like over here. So you can see it sort of adapted to that change. Okay, great. So now let's turn back on our columns and we can position these. So it's actually pretty much in line with where I want it, but I want to have 100 pixels of space in between these. And then I want to duplicate this. So another way that we can find a component that we created is by going into assets, and all of our local components are going to be listed here. So I can just drag one of these out and there we go. So we're going to just align those up. I'm going to do one more. That looks pretty good. Now, what I want to do is change these names so that they're not exactly the same. So this is where it's important to understand that by changing this on the instance level, it's not going to affect any of the other components. So I'm going to go in and change all of that. And I can also change the image fill. I'm going to go in here and just switch up this image, and same with this. So it's looking good, but I feel like these are a little bit too close to each other. Like this is just kind of, I don't know. I don't really like that. So what I'm going to do is actually frame these together. So Option Command G, turn on auto layout and increase the spacing here. So I think 32 looks pretty good. And you probably noticed that this component here is cut off, which is of course what we want. But something that might be helpful to know is that you can also turn off clip content. So I'm turning it off on the whole level here. I'm also going to turn it off on this frame. So that way you can actually see all of these, which is super helpful. So yeah, you can play around with that too if that's helpful. But it's nice because it is also possible to turn it on like really any frame. So because I just framed those together, now look, I can actually clip this content just by like decreasing the size of the frame. So if I don't want it to go off the page at all, even like just the bounding box, I could bring it in like that. So that's something that might come up for you as well. So now we want to have some buttons here so that you can toggle left and right through these images. So I'm just going to hit F, create a frame. You're probably so bored of me creating frames. I'm going to make this white, give it those rounded corners so that it's nice and consistent. And then I am going to grab this same icon here and make it black. And I'm just going to tilt it. And let's say we actually want to make this arrow itself bigger. If I go like this, you can see that the bounding box increases, but the arrow itself does not. So to fix that, we're going to go in to this arrow. So I'm kind of like double clicking into the frame to find the arrow. And instead of center, we're going to change this to scale. And that's going to actually make the arrow increase in size as I increase the size of the frame. So I'm going to make this 32 by 32, and then just going to duplicate that out And there we go. We've got our arrows. And now let's just align them nicely to the sides. We'll also make sure they're aligned with these components. Okay, awesome. Now we're on to the last section, which is the footer. So I'm going to hit F for frame, create us a nice frame for our footer, give it a fill. We're going to add that last image that we've got is looking pretty good. And then we'll add our text once again, just aligning it up as always with our columns. Okay, now I want to have a sort of like email opt-in here. So I'm gonna show you how to create, I guess, a form. So I'm gonna hit F and we're just going to create some sort of frame in here. I'm going to give it a fill. And I'm going to show you actually how to create a glass effect for the background because I think that would be kind of cool. So what we're going to do is lower the opacity. So let's say actually like 20, like kind of a lot. And then I'm going to go into effects, hit the plus button, change it from drop shadow to background blur, and then go in and you can increase this blur. So let's see. 16 looks pretty good. See how that's nice and blurry? We're going to give this that 4 pixel radius. And then how to make it look really kind of glassy is to give it a stroke that's white, but it's actually a gradient. So I'm going to switch this to gradient and then just like really subtly, I'm going to spread out this gradient here. Okay, that's pretty good. And then to make it even more subtle, I'm gonna change it to 50%. And you could make it even, let's see, 2 pixels wide. Yeah, that looks kind of glassy, I guess. Actually, I kind of like the 1 pixel better. Okay, cool. And so this is just sort of the frame for our form. Now we need to create the actual form. So what I'm going to do is give it a title. Header 2 is good for that. And then I'm going to just create another frame. We're going to give it a white background. Yeah, I think that should be good. Again, we're going to do 4 pixel corner radius. Then we need a label. So to label these, instead of 13, actually, I'm gonna make this, yeah, instead of 13, I'm gonna detach that and make it 11 so that it's a little smaller, and maybe even just medium. It's always good to put placeholder text, so we'll say your name here, and we can put that in our paragraph font. Okay, so that is how you create a field. And then I'll frame these together so that we can duplicate it and make another one. So then I'm gonna select this whole frame and turn on auto layout just so that we can kind of make the spacing consistent. So let's do 20 pixels of space between these. Let's give it a good 40 pixels on each side and 40 pixels on the top and bottom. I think that is looking really good. Now let's just make sure that we're aligning it to our columns. So we'll align it to this column here. Yeah, that should work. And then the last thing we're gonna do is add some social links. So I'm just gonna hit F for frame, create a box here. I'm not gonna give it a fill, but I am gonna give it a stroke only on the bottom. So I'm gonna just go into here and hit bottom only. We're gonna make this white. I'm gonna make it 2 pixels for now, at least just so we can see it. Okay, so this might look like a line, but as you can see, it's a frame. So then I'm gonna hit T and put some text in this frame. So Instagram, wow, that's huge. Not header 1, we want paragraph. Let's bring it off here so we can see what we're doing. We'll call this link, turn on auto layout, and then we'll have, let's see, I think 12 pixels or 10, no, actually 0 pixels on the left and right. And then I'm going to add in that arrow component or that arrow icon. So I'm just grabbing it from here. I'm going to select inside this frame, we're going to actually go in here and adjust it. And then let's see what happens as I drag this out. I want to change this to auto again so that there's an automatic amount of space in between these two. Then I want this to take up 3 columns. So we'll align it to these 3 columns. And this, we could definitely make this a component as well, since we're going to be using it on multiple times in our project. So I'll just come over there. We'll go into assets and we'll drag one right there. And then I'm just duplicating this. You can also, once you've dragged out a copy, you can then do Command D to duplicate with the same amount of spacing you just did. That is a really handy trick. Oops, I wanted this over here actually. I feel like this is too big. I'm gonna make this that 78 instead. Yeah, that's good. This way we can like align these. So we're gonna do Instagram, Twitter, email, and Medium. And then I feel like we need just a little sort of heading here for social links. And then with this whole footer, I think it'd be cool if it looked like it was sort of like coming up from the bottom. So I'm actually gonna take the whole frame and give it a corner radius, but I'm gonna do independent corners here so that I can just manipulate the top and bottom. So what if we did 20 and 20? There we go. That looks really nice, except we can see that behind here, we actually have some white coming through. So to change that, I'm just going to select on this whole frame and give it a background fill of this gray. So this way, when we come in, you actually can't see that little gap there. And I think that this just makes it look a lot more finished. So yeah, this is the final web page. I hope you enjoyed this crash course, and if you want to go deeper and design a full website that is completely responsive and prototyped, then don't forget to check out the course linked below. And if you want to learn how to turn your Figma designs into functioning custom websites, then have a look at our programs around Framer and Webflow as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!